Welcome back to another episode of Trash Talk. I'm Jon-Bernard. This is Nick. We are the K-Roos brothers here 1 week out before fight week for UFC 309. So this week's episode, we're going to give you a full breakdown and preview of things that are happening in and around the UFC this week. Nick, huge week.
One of the most anticipated cards of the year because Jon Jones is returning. After the fight was supposed to happen 1 year ago in November at New York, Madison Square Garden, Jon Jones versus Stipe. I'm really excited to watch it because it's the GOAT. Jon Jones is the GOAT. Anytime you get to watch him fight, it's going to be the biggest card of the year. It's not going to be Conor McGregor, pay-per-view buys, gate sales and all that, but it's going to be the next best thing.
I was saying to you off camera, it's a bit of an underwhelming card with what's under him. I mean, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, that'll be a great fight. We'll get that rematch. But again, I feel like
event. It's
for a Madison
heavy.
Square Garden card, it is. It's main event heavy. But we get to see the GOAT return. And yes, he is the GOAT. We spoke to a lot of UFC fighters at UFC 308, and they were saying, everyone is off Dana White. He's the GOAT.
Well,
he's the current GOAT right now.
Most fighters acknowledge him as the best fighter of all time. Obviously, everyone has the little caveat of, yes, okay, out of the octagon, he's not the best. He's not the best role model and all that. But inside the octagon, there's no flaw. He's the perfect fighter. The way he fights is very dominating. And he's got the track record to prove it. Literally, he's never lost. So what do you want? Like, there's no argument.
Well, that brings us to our hot take of the week. MMA hot take of the week. Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall. And now we're just saying his praises. But this week he came out in the lead up to fight week and said he's not interested in the Tom Aspinall fight. Tom Aspinall hasn't proven himself. What has he done? He doesn't want to risk his legacy against someone that doesn't really deserve it. And he's pretty much said that the only fight that interests him is a super fight against Alex Pereira.
To answer your question, yes, objectively, Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall. He's literally come out and said there's nothing Tom Aspinall can do for him to fight him. If he's saying there's nothing he can do, that means you're literally ducking him because he's the interim champion. He's got the quickest finish time, I think, in like UFC heavyweight history. All his fights end in round one. He's beaten Curtis Blades. He's beaten Sergey Pavlovich. He's done everything he needs to do to be the champion. But you could say that Jon Jones is holding up the division. I don't think he is. But if he doesn't fight him, then he's obviously ducking him because that's the next fight to make. There's no super fight to make because Pereira, you can make the argument he's done enough to, have the double title fight, but really he hasn't.
Now, the UFC will look silly as an organization if they don't make a Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones fight because essentially, what's the point of having an interim champion? It doesn't make sense. That's pretty much he's next in line as a contender. He's proven himself. He's defended the interim belt while Jon Jones is active.
And that makes no sense as it is because if you're the interim title, you literally go on. For example, Belal had to pull out of his fight in December. If Kamaru Usman versus Shavkat, the winner of that fight versus Belal. That's always the way it goes. UFC history, that's always what's happened.
They might be making special exemptions because it's Jon Jones and he is the GOAT of the sport, but regardless, the question is he ducking or not? He is. If he doesn't want to face Tom Aspinall, maybe he's too much of a threat. I don't know. Listen, at the end of the day, DC said it himself. Jon Jones is not scared of anyone. He's not necessarily ducking anyone. He could just be negotiating in front of the cameras. If you want to make this fight, you got to give me unbelievable amounts of money, main event money. And he's saying, yeah, I want this legacy fight with Alex Pereira. That's a fight that interests me as well. People will want to see that. People will pay big money to see that. Two of the biggest draws in the UFC right now. So what fight interests you more? Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira or Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall?
Personally, for me, I think you got to say Alex Pereira because who are the biggest stars in the UFC? Alex Pereira, Jon Jones, Conor McGregor. Right now, they're the biggest three stars in the UFC. So if you're going to put Jon Jones against Alex Pereira, that's the biggest fight in heavyweight history probably because Alex Pereira on the fight streak that he is right now, the superstardom that he brings with him, you can't make a bigger fight. Tom Aspinall, yes, that's probably the biggest and it'd probably be the best fight to watch. But actual stars versus stars, Jon Jones versus Pereira is the bigger fight.
Aspinall versus Jon Jones is the most intriguing heavyweight fight. People want to see if Aspinall can beat Jon Jones and if he is the best heavyweight right now. But the Alex Pereira-Jon Jones fight is just a draw. It's the Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. It's a draw fight to the UFC that people from all around the world would watch. But regardless, it's also that aspect of can Alex Pereira be a 3-division champion?
That's what I'm saying. There's so much
going into it. If you're the UFC, what do? You probably go with the money fight. Chael Sonnen's convinced that it will be Alex Pereira versus Jon Jones at some point.
Chael Sonnen gets a lot wrong. I mean, I like Chael, but
I love Chael.
He says a lot wrong. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think more likely the case will be Jon Jones versus Aspinall because even Dana White himself has said, I will get this done. They're going to fight. Like he's remained adamant the winner of Jon Jones Stipe will face Jon Jones. He thinks he can get it done. And I back Dana. When he usually says something, It carries weight. He gets it done.
So just you don't think Jon Jones is going to retire after UFC 309?
I don't see why he would, man, because the money's too good. And like, obviously, depending how the fight goes, if he struggles through it, maybe he just says, you know what, maybe I'm not what I used to be. But if he cruises through this fight, a similar one to Cyril Gane, man, he'll be too, not arrogant, but he'll be so confident in himself. He has to keep going.
Now, for Jon Jones's legacy, if he does dock Tom Aspinall after this fight, because I'm anticipating Jon Jones just walks through Stipe in that case. Say he ducks Tom Aspinall for this fight. Is this the biggest asterisk on his career that he never took this fight while he could? Because I know he's not in his prime, but he's essentially still Jon Jones. If he ducks Tom Aspinall, is this the biggest asterisk on his legacy?
No, for two reasons. The first reason, he's had a banned substance in his system. That's already the biggest asterisk of your career.
Okay, yeah, that's
There's
true.
nothing that will top that.
Yeah.
And second, he's already the greatest of all time. If he retires today, he's still the GOAT. Even if he doesn't verse him, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect his legacy whatsoever. Tom Aspinall, yes, he's on track to be one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, but at the moment, he's not there yet. He can be, but he's just not there yet. So if he ducks him, so be it. You know, Tom Aspinall versus all these other fighters. But Jon Jones, it's not going to affect his legacy at all.
I agree with you. He's already solidified himself as the GOAT. Look, people want to see it, and everyone has a recency bias. We're seeing what Tom Aspinall's doing right now. I think Tom Aspinall really got to go out and campaign for this fight himself.
Well, that's what he said all week. He goes, Tom, you're the backup fighter this week. What are you doing this week? Listen, I'm just going to have fun, and I'm going to campaign and just, I'm going to make fun of Stipe and make sure one of them fights me. That's all. That's his objective for the entire week. He's there with one purpose, and that's to call these guys out.
I'm sure we'll be catching up with Tom. But fellow Englishman Michael Bisping has taken to YouTube and has raised some eyebrows. He's pretty much said, listen, if Tom Aspinall doesn't fight Jon Jones after this fight, it's bullshit. And they should have serious discussions about whether Jon Jones should be stripped of his title.
Well, it makes sense what Michael Bisping's saying. I did find it funny. A lot of the comments were like, Michael, Dana's going to fire you. Just like,
be
watch
careful,
your mouth
watch
closely.
your tone, Michael.
But in saying that, he's not entirely wrong because the situation is if he wins this fight and doesn't fight Tom, essentially he's retired. So you'll be stripped of it anyways. So like, Jon Jones will be stripped of the title if he doesn't fight the next heavyweight in line. So it doesn't, like, unless he's fighting Alex Pereira as his retirement fight.
Yeah.
Again, they might keep the strap on him just for that fight. But eventually he will have to lose the title.
I think the UFC wouldn't go near stripping him because of Jon Jones and who he is as the GOAT, his legacy. They would just give him the respect and not strip him of the title. I don't think he's going to retire in the ring and leave the gloves on in the ring. That's a decision he can make outside the octagon. And if he chooses not to fight Aspinall and he's waiting around for another fight, or he chooses to fight Alex Pereira, they're not going to strip him. I'm saying whether it's if the UFC strip him or not, I say they're not going to strip him. And it's because it's who he is. It's Jon Jones. You make exceptions for these big fighters. And it's kind of on Tom Aspinall to make enough noise to be like, either you retire and strip the belt and I'm the current UFC heavyweight champion because you beat a 42-year-old Stipe, or we have the fight. And Tom Aspinall needs to make a lot more noise.
Tom Aspinall can't do anything. Like Jon Jones said, there's literally zero he can do. Tom Aspinall said, I'm going to retire Jon Jones one way or the other, whether I fight him or don't fight him. And it looks like he's going to retire him without fighting. And if you look at a similar situation, GSP retired as champion, refused to fight Robert Whittaker. People say maybe he just wasn't going to fight him, whatever it is. He didn't fight Robert Whittaker, and that made Rob Whittaker the champion. So there's situations where it's been similar in the past, and usually the older guy, the legend, retires. Why affect your legacy?
Yeah. If you're Tom Aspinall, what are you saying this week?
I'm saying, like, hey guys, I'm the heavyweight champion. I just parade around. I'm not interim. I am the champion.
I say that because Brandon Sharp put out and said, listen, I'm sick of this nice guy, gentleman, Englishman. Hey, I just think I can beat you in a fight. No, go out there, call him a pussy, say that you deserve it, say that you are the genuine heavyweight champion. Don't dance around it. Let's start building up some hype for the undisputed heavyweight championship match.
Yeah, I think Brandon's maybe a bit jealous of Tom Aspinall there. I don't think Brandon could ever reach the heights of Tom. Tom can go about however his persona wants it to be. Obviously, as fans, you want people to be more like Conor McGregor, parade around. But if Tom doesn't want to do that, you do your thing.
If Jon Jones didn't get injured, right? He tore his pec.
Yeah.
It was a very serious 9-month injury. Do you think he fights Stipe and he's still fresh, and then we were going to see this Tom Aspinall fight? Do you think the injury stopped this Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones fight from happening?
I guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
I guess you'll never know because Jon Jones, he always talked about fighting Stipe. As soon as he beat Cyril Gane in the octagon, he said, Stipe, you guys want to fight? You know, actually, is the funniest thing on this topic. In the octagon after fighting Cyril Gane, he's parading around to the fans. The UFC always gives the fans what they want. Well, John, the fans want you to fight Tom Aspinall now.
The fans are asking for it.
Are you gonna do what the fans? You always give them what they want.
And I'm sorry, I don't care to say that Tom Aspinall's done nothing. What is he? He needs to prove himself. The guy's on an unbelievable win streak. He's clearing through the whole division. He's the interim champion. That's all that needs to be done.
And just to add my 2 cents, if they do fight, I actually think Jon Jones will win.
Yeah,
I'm just going to put that out there.
I like Tom. I love Tom.
But Jon Jones is the GOAT. I can't see him losing ever.
Yeah, I think the fight IQ is too big, and we'll touch on it in the preview.
So that's why he's not ducking him, because he can beat him.
That's exactly right. I said he's not really scared of anyone, and DC agrees with that. But let's go to Belal Muhammad. UFC 310 has been announced. It's a December card. It's the last pay-per-view of the year for the UFC. Belal Muhammad ducks out with a toe injury.
It looked like a pretty serious toe injury.
I
From
agree.
the images that he showed, that was disgusting.
Belal,
please never post that again.
Hairy toes as well, hairy feet. But I didn't expect anything less. But he did go at Conor McGregor for withdrawing from his fight with a pinky injury, and it feels like Conor McGregor went at him, and it's kind of like a karma, like, hey, don't talk because it could happen to you.
Well, Conor McGregor pulled out of his fight with a foot injury, a toe injury.
Yeah.
Belal Muhammad's now pulling out with his toe injury. But Belal Muhammad's saying, look, I'm actually taking antibiotics for my toe injury. You had a few bruises.
Broken toe.
So, look, they're going to go at each other. No one's going to agree with Belal on Twitter, unfortunately for Belal.
The question is now, should Shavkat be fighting for an interim title in December, or should Belal just have his 6 weeks off and they rebook a fight?
Because it's only 6 weeks, I agree with Belal that it shouldn't be for an interim title, because look at the Islam situation. He's injured, couldn't fight in November, December.
No interim champion.
So there's no interim champion. He's just going to book the next card. Belal can fight in January or February. He's said that he wants to and that he can. And for Shavkat, if he fights for an interim title in December, you're not going to see another title fight against Belal for at least 4 months. So really, you're laying off Belal for even longer. So as a UFC, I would hold off and make Shavkat versus Belal, because you've already made that. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So just do it maybe in February, whatever it is.
This is a prime opportunity for the UFC to make the division interesting. Have an interim title, but who faces Shavkat for an interim champion?
Well, the first name off the list, Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman said, I'm talking to the UFC. They were trying to work it out.
Call me. I'm ready to go. He said the discussions are happening. They asked him on ESPN today. He says, I'm ready to go if it happens. I think he's had some time off. He's almost had a year outside of the octagon.
More than a year.
His last fight was October against Khamzat Chimaev, which he had a great showing. Let's be honest. In hindsight now, he had a great showing. Does he deserve a title shot after coming off a loss like that? After coming off 3 losses, really, when you look at it.
The 3 losses in a row is what's most concerning, because Leon Edwards, he's only lost once, and his name's not even mentioned by anybody. He's just gone completely MIA. Not one analyst or fan, when talking about the fill-in against Shavkat, has mentioned Leon's
Allegedly,
name.
Leon is recovering from a back injury.
Well, I haven't heard anything about it.
No one's talking about it.
I haven't heard one thing about it.
And then, you know what? You Leon Edwards fans, or you Rocky Edwards fans have just gone all quiet. Where are you? Where are you backing your boy, campaigning for your boy?
But Kamaru Usman is the only fighter that makes most sense, because I think JDM is still injured. Colby Covington, he can't fight for a title after the last year that he's had not fighting and actually coming off.
Well, Colby was on Submission Radio campaigning for a fight. He said, I could jump in December. It was like, Colby, we haven't seen you. It's great that you want to fight. We love to see you in the octagon, but could you have a fight?
And the last time you did fight against Leon Edwards, it was very disappointing.
It's for the title.
It was very, very disappointing showing. So he needs to do a lot more work. But look, the only fighter that does make sense is Kamaru Usman. One, because he's the greatest welterweight of all time, in my opinion. And he can actually beat Shavkat. Shavkat's the boogeyman of the UFC right now. And if you're not going to hold Shavkat for Belal, at least these guys are the 2 next best in line. Let them fight for basically what is an interim number 1 contender spot.
Shavkat's Kazakhstani translator pretty much said that, listen, this should be for the interim championship. We pretty much all know it's the number 1 contender anyway, and whoever wins this fight can go on to face Belal. He said, give me Usman, give me whoever, give me JDM. I'm ready to go. I think Shavkat, whoever it is probably next in line. Kamaru is going to give him the biggest trouble, I think. And if I'm Kamaru Usman, I don't want this fight. I'm being honest with you. I know it's for the title.
Well, they had that fighting where he kind of was ducking him on camera. So
he said, no, it's a fight where you would prove yourself against the boogeyman, the young up-and-comer of the division. But if you're Kamaru Usman, you need a win. You need some momentum before you go for that lunge for the champion again. Get back in the ring after such a long period of time off. I don't know. I want Kamaru to kind of stay out of this one. Give him JDM, give him Colby Covington. Let Shavkat prove himself to be the number one contender and then face Belal.
And the reason they probably want to do an interim title fight is because the eventual fight between Shavkat and Belal, at least it's a unification bout. It's an undisputed title bout. The way it just adds a few more stakes to the fight, makes it a bit more interesting, which that fight desperately needs because I don't think it's going to sell that well. Belal versus Shavkat, it's just not going to sell well.
Well, Colby Covington recently did an interview with Submission Radio, basically giving a state of the union of the division right now, where he sits. And he's pretty much called out Jack Della Maddalena. He's saying, look, I like this fight. He didn't go at him personally. He said he's a hungry fighter. He respects his fighting IQ, his fighting game. He's great on the feet. He says that fight makes the most sense right now. Could we see Colby fighting in Australia?
In February, that makes a lot of sense from my inside sources, which I'm not going to reveal. But I've heard JDM is still nowhere near being healthy enough to fight. So I don't think he's going to be on the Sydney card. People thought he was going to be on the Perth card, and it was surprising enough that he was still injured to not fight in Perth. I think he's going to have to miss out on Sydney. But Colby Covington giving him a lot of praise, saying
he's undefeated, he's hungry,
he's fearless, a high-level fighter. Again, that would make a lot of sense because it's an aging fighter, someone who's been in the top 5 for a very long time against an up-and-coming fighter, and that's someone that, look, if Colby does beat a rising, someone who's near the title shot, that would put him back in title conversation.
Does it give him a title? How far off is Colby Covington before getting another title shot?
He's 2 wins away. He tried to come out on submission and say, look, I win this one fight and I'm back in the title picture. You're not. Colby, you need 2 more wins. If he beats JDM, then beats another contender, whether it be Kamaru Usman in an eliminator or a Shavkat, whoever it may be, he needs to win 2 more fights before even thinking about going for a title.
Do we believe everything Colby Covington says? Because he did say that there was a contract on the table for Ian Gary that never eventuated. That would have been a great fight to watch. Then he came out and said Dustin Poirier was offered a fight almost double what he usually gets paid, and Dustin Poirier didn't want to take that fight. I know we want to see Colby in the octagon. How truthful is he when he's talking about negotiations with the UFC?
The Colby Covington-Dustin Poirier fight is kind of like a dream match. They've had so much beef for so long.
Calls him Louisiana swamp trash.
And Dustin Poirier has maintained...
It's gone on record,
He's always been adamant as saying, I will never fight him in the octagon because I don't want him to benefit from it.
I don't want to give him money. He goes, I'd rather fight him in the streets.
It'd be a street fight. So look, but if you're getting double pay, Dustin Poirier... Oh, it was rumored to be on 309 at MSG. Like, you can't get much bigger than that.
Yeah.
But if he turned that down, that's never happening. Whether he's talking shit or not, look, it's second nature to Colby to talk a bit of smack and maybe make up or exaggerate things. So I would say he's exaggerated this quite a bit.
Let's talk Alexander Volkanovski. Just put out some photos. The guy's looking like he's in the best shape of his life. I know he's 36 years old, but this is like prime Volk to me. He's in unbelievable shape. He looks like he's getting the itch.
Well, he posted the photo with the caption, anyone else getting the itch? So I'm getting the itch, Volk, because you've been out of the octagon since earlier this year. You've called out to Poirier in the octagon. You guys want to set up your fight in Spain. But the question is now, if you're Alexander Volkanovski, would you rather fight and hold out, or would you rather wait and hold out for a fight against the Poirier in Spain, or fight Diego Lopez as the main event in Sydney?
Well, the thing is, this Diego Lopez fight has just been rumored. It's out of nowhere. Apparently, the UFC are in discussions with Volk and Lopez's team about organizing that fight for UFC 312 in Sydney. If you're Volkanovski, you probably just want to take the title fight in the rematch. If you're a fan of Volkanovski, and what the fans are saying is, we don't want to see you jump straight back in with Ilia Topuria. We don't want to see that happen again. And I know you gave him some trouble early on in the round, and he was touching up Topuria a little bit. But a lot of people see that fight going the same way. So they want to see him get the win, get the momentum. Then the narrative is, hey, he's back. Volk is ready to go for that title fight in Spain against Ilia Topuria. So if I'm Volk, I'm taking a Lopez fight. UFC 312, you're fighting in Sydney. You're fighting in front of your home fans. People will gather around to see you. We want to see Volk back. And I think he can beat Diego Lopez. I think it's an easier matchup than going in and facing a rematch, something we've already seen happen against Topuria. Volk versus Lopez works, and it works in Sydney as well.
While I agree that Volk would beat Lopez, it's not worth the risk.
And it's just a great matchmaking for Sydney.
Yeah, but
who is going to fight in Sydney?
It doesn't. I'm just saying, as a risk factor, because if he does lose that fight, there goes all title opportunities. There's a very hard, long road back to the title. Volkanovski, if you're smart, which I think he's going to do, hold out for the mega fight in Spain versus Topuria, because yeah, maybe he loses that fight and maybe he's the outsider, but you're still a puncher's chance. You're always a puncher's chance. And Volkanovski, known as one of the best featherweights of all time, he can beat Topuria. He's got the confidence in himself. So don't risk fighting Diego Lopez and then having to fight Topuria even further later in the year. Take the title fight always. In any situation, every fighter always take the title fight. It's always more rewarding.
I just think he just needs that confidence back coming off that knockout. Again, it was like the Islam fight. He just needed that featherweight, defense, and he did that before facing Ilia Topuria. You know what I mean? So I would like to see him face Diego Lopez. I think it would be a great matchup for him. I think he could definitely try and out-wrestle him. I wouldn't want to see him stand up and trade with Diego Lopez because I fear Diego Lopez is one of the best counterpunchers in the division. But I guess we'll wait and see. If the rumors are true, UFC 312, Diego Lopez versus Volk, I'd like to see it. And I'd like that to be the number one contender to face Ilia Topuria in Spain.
And then the other
Because
rumors,
when you think about it, Diego Lopez versus Ilia Topuria in Spain would sell as well. Two Spanish bloody not up-and-comers, but two of the biggest in the division in Spain. Great for the European audience. That makes sense at bloody Bernabeu as well.
the other rumored fight for UFC Sydney was DDP versus Strickland. But Strickland has put out now that he's not fighting in Sydney, Australia because the government doesn't like him.
I don't know if he's saying that I refuse to fight in Australia because I don't like it here, or he's saying the government won't let me fight in Sydney. I don't want to fight in Sydney,
The
Australia.
way he framed it, I took it as the government won't let him fight. Maybe because he had some trouble. I think he punched a fan last year.
Yeah,
maybe they don't
that'll
let him
do
into
it.
the country.
Yeah.
But the way he's phrased it as, I'm not going to fight in Sydney in February. It'll more likely be Vegas in March.
DDP has said, no, I'm ready to go in Sydney.
That's why they're putting out conflicting messages.
And that is the rumoured main event for UFC 312 in Sydney. It's DDP versus Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland can't catch a break. Whether he has to fight in Canada, he's already fought in Australia, and he's always on edge with what he can say, what he can't say in these countries that are pretty strict on speech, let's be honest, because Australia, they're known to cancel some visas. They cancelled Novak Djokovic's visa. They've cancelled Candace Owens fairly recently. A couple other visas. Some Bonnie Blue, some chick that's coming down for schoolies. They just cancelled her visa. So Strickland might struggle to get a visa. If that's the case and he refuses to fight, does the UFC start to look at, maybe we can make a new fight? Khamzat Chimaev, who everyone is saying is next in line for a title shot. I don't know. Do you see they making that instead?
Well, it'd be pretty funny if you refuse entry to Strickland and then allow entry to Khamzat. Like just based off the fact that Khamzat wasn't allowed into America. I'm not saying he's done anything wrong.
Well, allegedly not allowed into America. We don't know yet. We don't know
But
yet.
regardless of that, Strickland is pretty adamant, though, if he's not fighting in February, the matchup will be in March. The only thing is, DDP is saying, no, I'm negotiating for Sydney in February. And I would love for it to be Khamzat because that is the next fight that I want to see.
I will say, the Western Sydney, Southwestern Sydney, they will turn up for Khamzat Chimaev. We've seen Sean Strickland here in Sydney. And you know what? The crowd love him. He was a fan favourite against Israel Adesanya. They came around for him. We've seen him. But if you get Khamzat on a main event card in Sydney, I'm telling you, the Lebs in Melbourne, they're Southwest Sydney, all these Western Sydney, they will come out in droves to watch Khamzat in a main event here.
I would go watch him. And that's why I want it. Selfishly, I want it to happen. It just means that Sean Strickland's probably not going to fight till later in 2025, which is unfortunate for him.
But he's next in line for a title. He's done enough. He deserves it. But, I mean, he's negotiating. And if he wants it in Vegas, that's his hometown. That's where he lives. That's where he resides. He wants it there. But it's also up to DDP, who is the champion. If he wants to fight in Sydney, he loves the little South African diaspora here in Perth, in Sydney. And he's the champ. So whatever that says goes, really.
Yeah, so let's go into our UFC 309 preview now.
UFC 309 preview. It is this week, Fight Week, Madison Square Garden. We're going to be on the ground interviewing the fighters at the media day, at the press conference. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But let's start off with one of the main card fights. Bo Nickel, Nick, I know you're a big fan of his. You're a big fan of his on social media. Do you think he goes through and makes easy work of this fight?
Well, he's paying $1.09, which says it all. And judging by his UFC 300 fight, he walks through his opponents pretty easily. He makes seamless work of them. And I expect the same thing to happen in this fight in New York.
Well, it's Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig.
The Scottish guy.
The Scotsman. Now, I think his last outing, he did get knocked out clean. He is known to be memed. He's been memed the shit out of online because, again, people say his fight style is living in the 2005 where he's always gone for a triangle choke and trying to get that submission. Bo Nickel, this is a step up for Bo Nickel and his past opponents. I think he's going to give him some trouble. Bo Nickel being a heavy favorite, I think the UFC is just using Craig as that step-up, stepping-stone fighter for Bo Nickel. And this will be a W for Bo Nickel where he'll have to do some work. He's a bigger middleweight, this guy, so he's going to obviously have to do some more work to get him down and lock him down on the ground. But I think it's a Bo Nickel W, not a TKO or I think it's more a submission or it goes the distance. Bo Nickel gets the win. So I'm taking Bo Nickel at the short price odds.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to maybe take him to not go the distance. Whether he finishes it by submission or TKO, KO, whatever it be, I just don't think Paul Craig is... I think they've set him up to lose here. They do it a lot. They obviously give fighters, these up-and-coming fighters like Bo Nickel, people that they think, okay, these are good tune-ups, these are good, fighters to raise your kind of legacy or raise your stakes in the game. So that's why I think Bo Nickel will walk through easily.
And it'd be stupid for Craig to obviously want to go and take down Bo Nickel, who that's his game. I mean, Bo Nickel's talking about matchups with Khamzat Chimaev in the future. He's been...
Shah of the Bullet, he's called
out Shah of the Bullet. He's looking, well past Craig. So it'd be probably smarter for Craig to try and keep this on the feet, test Bo's stand-up. And I don't think it's an exhibition for Bo to say, let's go and let's test our stand-up in the middle. No, do what you do best. Take him down, use your jiu-jitsu, get the win, whether it's submission or take him to decision. I think Bo Nickel gets the W here.
The next fight to preview, the co-main event, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Who do you got?
We've seen this fight before, okay? It's a rematch. I'm taking Charles Oliveira. And that's not me saying that. That's Dustin Poirier, who's gone up against both these fighters. Dustin Poirier's faced Charles Oliveira, lost him. Dustin Poirier's beat Michael Chandler in a fight of the night. It was one of the great fights. What he takes away from this is Charles Oliveira is just going to be too good. Whether it's stand-up, whether it's wrestling, Charles Oliveira's jiu-jitsu is just going to be too much stronger. He's had better opponents. He just faced Arman Sarukian, who arguably you could say Charles got the better of him that fight. If Sarukian's pants don't fall off and he pulls his pants down, who knows where that fight goes. I just think Charles has just been tested far better. Chandler's been out of the octagon for so long, essentially having 2 years off. Charles is better tested. He's going to be better. I'm going Charles Oliveira.
The reason I think Charles is more suited for victory here, he's in line for a title shot still. He's obviously pulled out from that fight last year against Islam. And other than his loss to Islam, he's kind of cleared through the top five. You look at the top five, he belted Dan Hooker, I think. He's finished Dan Hooker. He's finished Dustin Poirier. He's finished Justin Gaethje. He gets finishes. Charles Oliveira can be considered one of the best lightweights of all time. In saying that, Michael Chandler looks like he's in the best shape of his life.
He's in unbelievable shape.
He looks like he's ready to go. But with that amount of time out of the octagon, I just don't see you coming in and beating Charles Oliveira.
To Chandler's credit, Dustin said, listen, he is one of the best athletes in the UFC. He's very explosive and he can catch him. I just think Charles is just better as an all-rounder. He will get the better of him. And Chandler is kind of dumb enough to lose via a submission. You know what I mean? He can get his neck kind of taken. He lost to Poirier by a rear naked choke. And I could see Charles, being the submission master that he is, one of the best lightweights in the world, can beat him via submission. And that's why I'm going to go. I don't think it goes to decision. I'm taking Charles by submission.
Yeah, I think because it's tough because Chandler does get caught. He leaves himself open. Like every fight he's had, he gets caught.
Chandler took to Twitter and said, I understand I lost the rematch. At that point in time, I was new to the UFC. This was one of my first fights in the UFC. My ring time in the UFC was something like 4 minutes. Now I'm a seasoned veteran. I have 40 plus minutes in the UFC. I'm ready to go and come Madison Square Garden. This is a confident Michael Chandler. He's already mapped out his next opponents. He said, I'll go on and beat Charles Oliveira. Then I'll face Conor McGregor next in that March period. After that, I'll face Islam, win the title. And then he said, you know what? Then Max Holloway's been fighting. I'll go and give Max Holloway a title defense, and that'll be the best run of a lightweight and in UFC history.
He's confident. I mean, he's mapped out the best he ever. I mean, I don't think any fighter is going to beat those four names in 1 year.
Sounds a bit delusional.
It sounds a bit delusional because, firstly, you're going to have to walk through all these fighters to have quick turnarounds against the other ones. Firstly, I don't think you're going to beat Charles. Yeah. You can maybe beat Conor. You're not going to beat Islam. And then I think Max Holloway pieces you up as well.
To his defense, the last time he faced Charles, he did get the better of him in round one. He probably went in for that killer knockout, didn't have the patience, and that's why Charles kind of caught him and got the victory with those left hands. But I will say, I don't think Michael Chandler, the time out of the octagon will probably show in this fight.
Age and time out of the octagon always hurts a fighter.
So again, we're on the favorite, Charles Oliveira.
And that takes us to the main event.
Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, a fight that is 1 year in the making, was supposed to be last year at Madison Square Garden. It's pushed to this year. People are saying it's long overdue. This is both retirement fights, allegedly. I guess we'll wait and see. Nick, how do you see it playing out?
I see Jon Jones walking through Stipe Miocic, and I say that based off expert advice, and I say that based off his training camp. He's assembled the Avengers.
Super team.
A super team to help him prepare for Stipe. I'm talking Gordon Ryan.
For jiu-jitsu.
Joseph Parker.
Boxing.
And Gable Stevenson.
Olympic level
wrestler.
Yeah.
So he's picked up people from all over the world, all over the country, to make sure he's best prepared to beat Stipe.
And that's where Jon Jones gets his credit. It's his fight IQ. It's the way that he breaks down a fighter, implements his game plan. And that's why I think he's just going to be too good for Stipe Miocic. Stipe Miocic, he's 42 years of age. You're talking, and I know Jon Jones not in his prime, but you're still talking about the GOAT of the UFC that's not too far out of his prime, that walked through Cyril Gane. And I think that's going to be the same case. He said it himself, I want a dominant victory. I want to go in, maul him again. I want to show people why I'm the best in the UFC. He's been saying that all week in the lead up to fight week. And I think that's just going to be the case. He's saying it and he's going to make it happen. Gordon Ryan just said his fight IQ is just going to be too good for Stipe. His wrestle, his striking is just going to be too much for Stipe. And I think that's just going to be the case.
The only concerning thing for me with Jon Jones is coming off a significant pectoral injury. Because coming off a chest injury like that is very hard to recover from. He has taken a lot of time off, but still, to recover from those and come back stronger or even healthier, it is tough.
And not to take anything away from Stipe Miocic, he is one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Full respect to him. But the betting odds have him as one of the biggest underdogs, right now, this year. We're talking Belal Muhammad level, $6 outsider. You know what I'm talking about? So again, I'm going with Jon Jones. I'm not going to take him head to head. I'm just going to take Jon Jones. I'll wait for the round betting to come out, but it's not going to see the distance.
The thing for me with Stipe,
I'm just going to go Jon Jones, probably a round 2 submission or knockout.
the thing with Stipe for me, the most concerning thing, we've all seen Stipe walk out at November last year, walking out like an old man, like his hips were gone, like he had torn both hamstrings. There was something wrong with the way he's walking. There's no way now I'm going to see that footage and say, you know what, he can beat the greatest fighter of all time. That just can't happen. So Jon Jones, even off the pec injury, with this super team that he's assembled, he's going to walk through Stipe. And it's unfortunate because Stipe is one of the GOATs in the heavyweight division. But I just think it's just every aspect that you match him up against, Jon Jones will be better.
Well, he looks like he's in tremendous shape. He's in great fighting shape right now. We've been seeing the training videos on his Instagram. I'm taking Jon Jones. I'm saying it's inside 2 rounds. Jon Jones by submission or TKO within 2 rounds.
Okay, well, that takes me to now my multi for the weekend. Yeah. I'm going to go Bo Nickel by TKO or submission. KO, TKO or submission. I'm going to go the women's fight. I think it's Silva versus Araujo to go the distance. Don't know much about them, but women's fights, 3
always
rounds.
Cost you. They always cost you.
They're going to go the distance. There's no finish happening in that fight. I'm going to take Charles Oliveira head-to-head, and then I'm going to take Jon Jones by TKO or submission as well. So I'm looking for finishers, and the only fight I think going the distance will be the female fight. That's a great multi, great value. Considering the short price favorites that there are on this card, that's the best way to go.
Okay, I'm taking Bo Nickel. I know he's short price, but I'm taking Bo Nickel to win by TKO or submission. I'm going Charles Oliveira to win by TKO or submission.
Wow.
Jon Jones to win by TKO or submission within 2 rounds. Take that how you will. I'm taking round 2 TKO or submission. And I'm not touching the female fight, Nick. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Every time I've done it, we've lost, and I'm learning from my mistakes. Nothing against the females.
The thing with this is we're asking for finishes, which is always very, very tough in the UFC because most fights usually go to decision. But with how these fights are panning out, the fighters that are in them, we should be seeing finishes this weekend.
But make sure you're tuning into UFC 309 this week. We'll be having coverage all week on our YouTube at K-Roos Bros. And check out our clips at Jon-Bernard K on Instagram and TikTok. We'll be interviewing the fighters this week. We'll be asking questions at the press conference. We'll be there at the weigh-ins. So make sure you keep an eye out for all the content this week. We appreciate all the support. Make sure you liked and subscribed. We really appreciate it. Back to you in the studio, Ryan.